On this episode, we talk about coolant gauges dropping off, boost loss on an FSI engine, and a built Mark 6 engine with a motor smoking. This is episode 21 of the AskDAP show, where we answer your Volkswagen and Audi questions. Okay, so for the holidays, we're going to do something a little bit special for everybody. We wanted to do something for the holidays. Obviously, you see our Christmas tree behind me. For any order over $150 on our website, it's going to be getting a free VW ornament, which you can see right here. Nothing needs to be done for that. All you do is place an order. Again, anything over $150 at shopdap.com is going to get a free ornament. So check us out there. Again, shopdap.com. That's our main page, and you'll find our catalog there. So with all that said, let's get into the show.
I have a 2008 2.0T BPY Passat with a 6-speed manual transmission. The car is 103,000 miles. I've owned it since new, and for most of its life it's been APR Stage 1. The problem I'm having is a strange noise and loss of boost and power during mid-throttle acceleration. This has never happened during full throttle acceleration. There is no slippage in the clutch. RPMs do not rise out of proportion with vehicle speed. The sound can be described as somewhere between metal on metal or metal on rubber squeal that can be heard inside the cabin with the windows up. It lasts for a few seconds, then goes away. I can see the boost on the gauge drop, and there's a noticeable drop off in power before the sound goes away and the power returns. All of this started after I had a flat tire and drove for a few weeks with a mismatched spare tire on the front. I had replaced the original tires with a larger size. Could I have damaged something in the differential by doing that?
Orville, so problems with boost related to a flat tire. A boost problem is pretty much guaranteed to not be related to a differential, so obviously it's not going to be directly related to the differential using a spare tire. The only thing I could say that potentially could have been related to the spare tire is if you had a flat and you drove on it for a while. Sometimes flats will kind of shred apart as you're driving on them if you did it at really high speed or something like that. And if that's the case, a lot of times it'll throw chunks of tire, and potentially, because they have all kinds of metal weave in them, they're pretty strong, and it could hit a boost pipe and maybe crack it or damage the hose in some way. There are boost pipes that run around the lower part of the engine, and so maybe that could be a possibility. More than likely, it's probably just a coincidence that problem happened at the same time and coincided with your flat tire. It's more likely to be something else, maybe like PCV valve related or diverter valve related, causing a leak. We have articles about both, so I'll link to both of those articles that explain more detail about those specific failures, but I would say it's probably one of those two as a problem.
Hi Paul, I have a 2008 Passat FSI, and when I'm driving with the engine fully warmed up, the engine temp will suddenly drop on the gauge. I'm pretty sure the thermostat door is sticking open. It seems like a pretty common problem when I googled it. Why do these things fail? My car is at 110,000 miles. I'm looking at doing a replacement next weekend. Do you have any tips for replacement? Seems like the problem a lot of VW owners have.
Issues related to the coolant gauge dropping. So you're thinking it's thermostat. It's probably not thermostat related. Most likely, generally on VW and Audis, pretty much all VW Audis historically, when the thermostat fails, you either get one of two things: a malfunctioning cooling system fault, or most often, especially when the weather is like it is now, where it's getting colder, the vehicle will not get up to operating temperature. So what happens is the thermostat gets stuck open, and so it's constantly flowing through the radiator. So you start driving on a really cold day, the thermostat never closes, and you're constantly cooling all the coolant 100% of the time, and your heat will probably work mediocre or not well, and then you have a problem with your cooling system malfunction problem. So when that happens, then you need to replace your thermostat because it's stuck. The issue you're referring to sounds like you're talking about the gauge that basically just suddenly drops while you're driving, and that is more likely to be an electrical problem because your coolant can't cool off immediately just like that. It can't go from, let's say, 200 degrees to 0 in a matter of a second. Now, if it's dropping slowly over time, as you're driving and speeding up, especially highway driving, would cause that to cool down quicker as you were progressively getting faster, then that could be thermostat related. But if it's not, if it's just sudden, it's almost guaranteed to be coolant temp sensor related. And so we'll put a link to that. Most current model VW and Audis use the same gray 2-pin one. We'll put a link to an OEM one here. And we'll also put a link to a FSI thermostat for anybody else who might have a question about that. But I'm pretty sure your problem is coolant temp sensor related.
I have a MK6 GTI with a built engine, and I've noticed it smokes on stop while starting the car. The smoke is not all the time, it comes and goes. It is white smoke, and it comes in medium puffs on stops and on starts. It keeps smoking. I also noticed that the tips are moister than seems like water or something like that, but not oil. Yesterday I had 0 oil in my oil pan. I got burnt to the point that there is no oil on the dipstick. Any ideas, suggestions, or how to fix it?
So, issues relating to a smoking engine. The one thing I want to touch on before we even go into this is smoke color when it comes to problems with vehicles. So, smoke color usually determines what the engine is burning, and so you can help determine what the problem is based on the color of smoke. So, but that gets a little bit dicey because if you're not super familiar with it, it might seem like one is something that it isn't. So white smoke is generally related to coolant, but coolant smoke is generally very white, and it's also generally sweet in the smell of it. Oil is generally a bluish gray color, but it could be mistaken for white because it's not always like super blue unless maybe it's burning pretty heavy. And then the other one would be if you have like a darker burning exhaust, it might be related to fuel. So with all that said, based on everything else you're talking about, you're saying that you're losing oil. You can be pretty sure that if you're losing oil, that it's almost guaranteed to be burning oil. So it wouldn't really be white, it's probably more like bluish gray. We'll actually put a link here and show you some information about this is actually my personal vehicle, which is a 16 valve engine swapped into a Corrado with a turbo on it. It has currently a bad turbo, so it's smoking. The oil seals in the turbo are leaking, so it smokes quite a bit. So it would probably be similar to this, although this turbo is probably a lot worse than what yours looks like because this is a constant problem on this car and it does need a turbo. The only thing basically that could be a problem with this specific car is either related to the engine build or to the turbo. So I actually got some information back from Hazza after his initial question and asked him if the problem was immediately after the engine build or has it been some time. And so he said it's been about a year since the engine build. So it's very likely that it's not related to the engine build per se, but either a part that failed internally in the engine, you got a ring problem or a valve guide problem or something like that. But more likely, you probably have a turbo problem. If you got kind of a high mileage vehicle, you built it to go big turbo, because obviously that's why he built the engine, was to eventually go big turbo. It sounds like it's probably turbo related, but obviously I can't, never having seen the car, it's hard for me to really verify that. The one thing I can say is usually turbos that are bad, if you get on boost real hard, they'll start to give more smoke as you do get on boost. And so at idle they'll smoke, and then they'll get a little bit better as you drive, but on hard boost they'll smoke even more. And so just something to be aware of. Usually a turbo that's starting to smoke like that, it's only a matter of time before it just becomes, the seal blows out completely and it just starts burning oil like crazy out the exhaust. So that's probably a ticking time bomb if it is turbo related. And if it's not turbo related, then you still want to address it, because if you're burning a lot of oil, it's a problem and you want to address that. So you saying there's no oil in the pan, just want a quick note about that. If there's no oil in the pan, that means I'm sure it wasn't registering on the dipstick itself. If it wasn't registering on the dipstick, that means it's probably around like 1 to 2 quarts low. Obviously it could be more. It's probably not bone dry, but obviously 1 to 2 quarts low is really bad and you don't want to have that. So one, make sure you keep an eye on your oil level, because obviously you can do more damage to the engine if you let it run dry or low on oil. And I think you'll have to look at it and see. If you're going big turbo anyway, and that was your plan to do with the engine anyway, you know, going to that big turbo instead of replacing obviously with another KO4 is probably a better choice. Thank you for watching episode 21 of the AskDAP show. If you want your questions answered, shoot us an email, info@shopdap.com.